everybody sees the world in a different way, and how you see the world can be your superpower.
Welcome to another episode of Bigger Than the Hustle podcast, and I've got another international guest with me. His name is Shil. Now, what interested me about Shil was that he's done quite a few things, and he comes from an interesting space. And his story is quite interesting, especially for people who feel that they may have something about their life that holds him back. He's used that to excel himself and springboard himself into whatever, path he chooses for himself. So I'm not going to go into it too much because I'm sure he can introduce himself so much better than I can. So just before we start, hi, Shil.
Hi, how are you?
I'm really well. How are you keeping?
Well, thank you.
Good. And like we discussed before the podcast, we're all happy over in England. Our team has stayed in the car in the Euros, so we're all ecstatic at the moment. So let's talk about it. Well, we can get into football at some point anyway, but I'm going to hand over the microphone to you. If you could introduce yourself and what you're about, and then we can go into the conversation from there.
Sure. You've already introduced my name, Shils Shanghavi. I'm originally from Kenya. I moved to Australia when I was 15. And now, currently, my career has taken me to what I do now, which is specializing in public speaking. So I'm a professional speaker. I'm an MC. I'm a facilitator. And my whole world revolves around public speaking and presenting.
Perfect. Now, can we step back a little bit here? So what's really interesting about the stance you have now in terms of public speaking and where you've come from is that it's not always been like this, has it, for you? Where you've come from in terms of your own personal challenges with speaking and how that's led you here, which makes this journey really even more awesome because of where you've come from. So if you can go into your backstory a little bit so that it sort of springboards us into the next sort of steps.
Of course I can. I'm always unsure about how far back to go. So I like to with a very short summary, and then I'll let you to me. Also, just so I know, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, that's fine. No problem at all. We're all grown-ups here.
You drop an F-bomb or an S-bomb and I don't feel bad. Shit.
No problem.
Speaking of swearing, I have always been shit scared of public speaking my entire life. And the reason I've been so afraid of it is because I'm human. I'm human like everybody else. I'm very afraid of being in front of an audience and being completely exposed and not having anywhere to hide. And the reason for the fear is because ever since I was a young boy, since I was about 10 years old, I've had a really bad stutter. And it's dominated my life. It shaped who I am. It shaped how I think. It shaped my perception, my outlook, my confidence, my self-esteem. It's had a monumental impact on the person I am. And I still have it. While we have this conversation today, I will control it. And in order for me to control it, anytime I speak, I apply 8 different techniques to remain fluent. 8 at any given time. And these techniques involve breathing, slowing down, mind mapping, tapping my fingers. I speak in a particular way. And if I don't do any of these 8 techniques in a particular order, I crumble and I stutter pretty badly. And it gets so bad that we can't have a conversation. And so I've had it my entire life. And because of this, communicating in any capacity to me has been the most terrifying thing you can possibly do. And I figured over time as I grew older, if I don't teach myself how to control it, if I don't face the fear I have and accept the vulnerability I have, then it would be very difficult and challenging to progress in life. And so I decided to teach myself how to speak in public because I thought if I could teach myself to speak in public, I have to learn to control myself.
Yes. Yeah. And what I find really interesting about the story is that you're teaching from a place of knowing. So it's something that you've come from, you've gone through a process yourself, and that using that information, that education, the time when you've not seen it as an impediment, even though it is, you've said, okay, I need to work on this. I need to get better at controlling this if I am to communicate effectively with, whoever I want to communicate with, right?
You use the word impediment. And I'd like to talk about that because for my life, I've seen it as being exactly that, an impediment. I've seen it as being a glitch in my system. I've seen it as being what I call my kryptonite. However, over time, I've learned it's not a kryptonite. It's a superpower because when you have a stutter, you think differently. You see the world differently. You're wired to read human behavior, body language. Your brain thinks in a way that other people wouldn't think of. And there was something interesting I read 4 years ago, that approximately 3% of the world's population stutter. 3%.
Wow. Okay.
So when I read that, I thought to myself, if you sit in the 3% of any category, you are in elite company. If you think about it, if you sit in the percent of any category, you are in elite company.
Yeah.
And instead of seeing it as being an impediment, I saw it as being something elite. And I to build this elite mindset rather than let it control me.
And the perspective that you've had on it has been positive. The way you've dealt with it has been positive, and the way you continue to grow yourself as a person continues to be positive. There are that is perspective. You put a positive filter on it and said, okay, I'm not going to use this to hold me back. It's going to excel me and drive me forward to whatever I want to do. I'm not going to see it as a hurdle. I'm going to work around it, over it, under it, or whichever way I can get around it, but it's not going to stop me from doing what I want to do. And that is something that comes from within. There has to be something within you that then allows you to then push forward. Whereas others may see it, like you said, as the hurdle that they can't get around, and therefore it stops and limits them from doing whatever it is that they want to do, correct? Now, where do you think that mindset comes from for you? Because I know it is a mindset. I know it's a perspective, and you can see both sides. It comes down to the saying, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, either way, you're right. Again, which is a perspective, correct? So for you, where did that ability to not see as impediment, but to see as actually something that I have, it is a superpower and I can work with this, as opposed to the negative side?
I've always been competitive, extremely competitive, sometimes not good competitive. And I'll give you an example. On Mondays, I go to football. It's a five-a-side AstroTurf. We play off the walls, and it's a social league. However, I don't play like a social league. I play because I want to win. And so everything I pursue, everything I put my mind to, everything I decide to do, it becomes a game to me, and it becomes a competitive game where I want to be the best at it. I want to be recognized for myself. I couldn't care what anybody else thinks. However, I want me to feel like I'm the best at it. So I've always had a very competitive drive in me. I've always had a determination about me that I want to give it a go. And also, fuel for my fire is the bullying that I've faced. I mean, my entire life I've been picked on, teased, beaten up because I couldn't communicate and because I couldn't speak. And what I didn't realize is that the more this happened over time, it was building very thick skin. I was building a resilience and a discipline about myself that others wouldn't have had to deal with, or others perhaps wouldn't have had to go through. And that over time became fuel for my fire.
Mm. And where do you think, as that process was happening of building up and strengthening yourself, where did you draw strength from?
Where did I draw strength from?
Yeah. Was it people around you? Was it so was it just a thought process that you had, or was it something that helped you along the way?
I'll be honest about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you the cliche, I drew strength from my family and friends and my loved ones. And yes, of course, they've all been enormous as support for me. However, I drew my strength from the haters, people who bullied me, people who teased me, people who would call me names. That's where I drew my strength from. And every time I heard something, my mind would think, I'm going to prove you wrong, or I'm going to be better, or I'm going to one day do something that you can't do, or that you don't have the courage to do. And I courage specifically because that's my big word. So there's a speaker I follow in Australia. His name is Matt Church. In fact, his book is here, the Thought Leaders Practice, and he's an incredible speaker. And Matt talks about finding your big word. And everybody's got a big word. My big word is courage. And so I would always try to filter my thoughts through the lens of courage. And I would think to myself, well, if you haven't got the courage to do this, I have the courage to do it. And that in turn gave me that fuel and competitive drive, which I needed, which I wanted.
Courage, love that word. At times when you feel that maybe you could be doubting yourself in something, or it's times where you're not sure, you've hit a little bit of a low, and just I suppose speaking to yourself where you say you just need a little bit of courage to do this, and that sometimes just draws something out of you which just by not saying it, you may not tap into that reserve. And I agree with that. It's a brilliant word to use as a linchpin, as an anchor to anything, because it is a lot of things just take courage, don't they?
My whole philosophy is get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Get comfortable doing something which you don't like, or something which stretches you, or something which you feel anxious or nervous about, because most people will feel that way. So public speaking, on average, 85% of people would rather avoid it. On average, 85% of people say they would rather die than speak in front of an audience.
Yeah.
Okay. You really want to test that theory? Because I guess you said somebody, okay, either you go and speak to that crowd of 10 or 50 or 500, or I shoot you. Which would you rather do? I promise they'll choose go and speak. So you actually test the theory, and so I always think, you say you're afraid of it, or you say you don't want to do it. However, if you do it, chances are you'll mess up, and you'll embarrass yourself, and you'll stutter, or you'll stuff up, or something will go wrong. I promise you won't die though.
Very true. Thank you for that reassurance. And it's true, because the fear can eat us up, right? So the thought of it rather than the action. So it's the mountain that we put in front of ourselves rather than the actual the event itself. Because like you said, and I get it. I know before I started mentoring in bigger groups, I was like, well, what am I going to say? I don't know what to say. Why would people want to listen to me? All these stories that where we question or we self-doubt ourselves. And what I realized is once you're up there, first of all, yeah, it is uncomfortable. It's a bit weird, a bit strange, all these eyes looking at you. But then the way I dealt with it was, I thought of myself being in the audience. So I'm sitting there watching someone on stage. And I thought it's just me and how I'm processing that person on stage. I don't see everyone else sitting here. So then when I went on stage, I just thought I'm just talking to individual people. I'm not talking to 500 people because everyone's having their own experience of whatever it is that I'm sharing. And then once I decided to do that, it just became so much easier because I was just talking to individual people as opposed to, big groups.
Mate, I've been through any situation you can imagine, from throwing up to passing out to stuttering to tripping over. I've been through everything, every possible kind of situation, and I still came through it. And I didn't die. I'm still here. I learned from all of it. And if anything, it made me more resilient. And we're humans. We will always be nervous. It's very normal. You must have heard of somebody called Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Mark Twain?
Yeah.
Mark once wrote, there are two types of speakers: those who are nervous and those who are liars. No matter how accomplished you ever become as a presenter, or no matter how accomplished you become even as an athlete. Let's talk about England and their game last night when Kane and Sterling and Maguire and Grealish and all of them were lining up in the tunnel to go out. They were nervous. They were nervous, and they're lying if they said they weren't, because it's a big occasion and all eyes are on them. What they've learned to do is how to control their nerves.
Yeah. And I suppose use that energy to drive them as opposed to make them shrink. And I guess from the experience of doing it so many times, that's where the nerves turn into energy to produce. I know you can shrink in those moments, but then it's that, I guess, that experience that makes you grow, hopefully. Now, something that you mentioned right at the start in your intro, you came over to Australia when you were 15, correct? And then before that, you were in Kenya. Is that correct? Yeah. It's funny because my mum is from Kenya, so she's from Nairobi. She was born there, raised there, and then they came over to the UK in the 70s when a lot of Indians came over to the UK. Now, can you tell me a little bit about life in Kenya when you were growing up before you moved over to Australia?
Sure. Kenya is home, my first home. I come from Mombasa, which is a little island off the coast of Kenya. And it's developing. It's still developing. I don't think it'll ever get out of the developing status. It has a charm about it, and it's very old school. It's not a modern place at all. It's a coastal town. How can I describe it? All I can say is that it's a coastal town where you get the smell of the ocean, you drink coconut water, and there's about 3 or 4 places which you can go to. A lot of times there's no electricity. You don't know when the water is going to come back on, and you live in darkness and in fear that you don't know what's going to happen. My mom, the memories I have growing up there, my mom's cooking and the places I used to go out to eat and the places as a kid where I would get into trouble. There's a charm about it which can never be replaced with anything else. However, I wish more would happen to Kenya because there's so much opportunity there to do good with the country. And it's sad that the rest of the world goes in one direction, but Kenya stays at a level which I don't think will ever grow or come out of.
Yeah. I had...
Really? Did I answer your question there?
Yeah. So and then you'll then shift over to Australia. What was the reason behind that? Why Australia?
Education.
Okay.
It was education. My mom has some family here. She has her sisters and her brother. And I think we decided to send me here because I've been here before. I liked it. And also, most kids from Kenya go to either England or America. They go to the same places that I know of anyway. And half end up going back to Kenya. They'll take over the family business, or they'll continue on with whatever the family does. And from an Indian culture, if you are not, and I'm okay to publicly talk about this as well, and I can get skinned, I don't mind. If you are not a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or an engineer or one of the mainstream bankers or something in those fields, you are considered to be a failure. And there's a puzzling look from people about, huh? You what? So I came here for education with a plan that at some point I might go home to take over the business, or I'd grow up to be a lawyer or an engineer or get into business. I have gotten into business, but I do public speaking. So in the Indian community, I know I'm digressing here, I'm considered to be a failure, yet I do okay for myself.
It's so true. I get that, in terms of that if you say the spotlight on us in terms of those professions, and then just like yourself, being a podcast host and a business owner, I've fulfilled half the ambition. I am a business owner, but the podcast host, I'm a complete failure in their eyes. So I'm all right with that. I'm enjoying myself. That's the main thing. I think one thing was quite interesting with my parents is that they always said, no matter what it is that you do, just enjoy what you do. That's probably the most important thing.
I live an incredibly fulfilled life. I do well for myself. I'm extremely comfortable, as is my wife. It took my family and friends a little while to understand when I said I'm leaving my job to do public speaking, and they all went, "What? You're what?" And I could sense that shock, and I could see the look when they all went, "Are you crazy?" And there was this tipping point where no one knew what I was doing or what my plan was. I knew, my wife knew. However, even my parents, it wasn't until a year and a half or 2 years in that they went, okay, we understand now. My father-in-law still has no idea.
Now, something that I read about you, which I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, is that you did a documentary about your life, and you recorded it. You brought a camera with you for a short period of time. Now, can you tell me what that's about and the reason that you did it and what's come out of that?
Sure. I'll clarify what you have, the way you've explained it. I didn't create it, I didn't record it, and I didn't have a camera. So I'd like to make here. I was approached by a filmmaker in about a year and a half ago in Perth. I was approached by a film director who watched my journey, who follows me, and we met through a video I wanted shot for the website. And out of that, we built a friendship, and he took me out for a coffee and said, I'm working on my next project, and I'd like that project to be on you. And I thought, what does that mean? And so long story short, he followed me for 12 months with a camera, and he made a documentary about me and my life and my mindset and my journey into public speaking. He released the documentary in February this year globally. It's done pretty well. It's won a whole bunch of awards now, which is very cool for him, because you must remember it's a documentary. This isn't me acting. I'm not an actor. It's just a guy that had a camera who's filmed the documentary about my life very intimately. And the aim of it was hope. The word we came up with was hope. in that we would love it if others choose to watch this, that it gives you hope that if you really put your mind to something and you have the courage to do something, what's the worst that can happen? Try it. And so that was the intention of the movie, that we didn't know what was going to happen or where it would go. And so we've been very surprised at the success it's had.
Brilliant. And did you see something in yourself by having a camera on you, by being on the other side of the screen, that you may not have realized before?
I learned a lot about myself, and that's a difficult one to answer because I've been on camera quite often over the last 3 or 4 years. And so I've grown accustomed to seeing myself on the other side. What I learned the most was getting comfortable doing something which stretched me even more, and understanding that when the scenes were shot or when particular parts of it were put together, what I saw on screen is very different to what the audience is seeing, because I breathed all the scenes. I know what was going through my mind. And actually what surprised me the most was how in a few scenes, how comfortable I looked, whereas in the background, I was shitting myself. When it was out on the big screen, so we had a premiere, we had about 60 or 70 people come along to the first screening, another 60 or 70 come along to the second one. And each time I thought to myself, I can't believe I'm so comfortable there, when in actual fact, I was shitting myself when he was asking me those questions or he had the camera in my face. So it gave me a really cool perspective on that.
Mm-hmm. And it's really surprising. First of all, there's a couple of things that really surprised me about this whole thing, which was having a documentary made about your journey and about your life. It's cool. It's in somehow you've made an impact on someone's life for them to want to share that. So that, I think that's amazing. So, hats off to you for that. And when you're doing it from your truth, it's not, a play. It's not a mask. It's not, an audience to impress. It's just me being me. And again, if I can share that and that can inspire someone, then my life has been worth it. And I think they're the two things that really stand out. So, I applaud you on that.
What has been challenging, what's been an eye-opener is when this happens to you, when there's somebody who makes a movie about you, or when you're, for example, my LinkedIn profile, I'm quite active on my LinkedIn. Not quite active. My content does well on LinkedIn, and I'm thankful that my content does well. The world becomes a much smaller place. And all of a sudden people start to follow you and they start to comment on your work, and they give you their opinions, and the challenge is people who don't know me reach out and just start abusing me. So I've had hundreds of trolls and hate mail and really sad and offensive things which was said towards me and about my skin color or my journey or anything. You can pick a number of things. And that's been sad. It was tough to deal with at first, and over time I've just become numb to the whole thing.
And why do you think that happens?
I don't know. I know there's been times, there was one chap in the UK who wanted to engage me for work. And so there's a process that I go through for all my clients, and there's a layer of extra process that I go through for my international clients. And we went through the whole thing, and I issued him with a fee. Now, my fee is not affordable for some people, and I get that. I respect that. However, the response from this particular about my fee and why I'm so expensive and that I'm trying to rip him off and And so very politely, I cut the conversation off. He cancelled his account, started up a new account. He continued to hassle me. So he stopped his account, created a new one. He trolled me, stopped his new one. And that went on for months. And I don't know why. I really don't know why.
Now, it's funny because over the last 2 weeks, within my own business, something similar happened where someone came in for a quote. So I'm in home technology installation, like smart home. And someone came in and said, oh, I want a quote for this. And I gave him a quote, and he goes, how can you quote that kind of money? You know, you're ripping me off. It's for an old lady, and you think you can do this and do this and all this, right? And I said, you're not understanding. You're giving me what you need. This is what we quote. We may not fit into your budget, which is fine, but this is what it is based on the service we give, the quality of the materials we use and the way we install. And if there's a problem, we'll come back and sort it out. So all that's in the price. And if you can't justify that, then that's fine. There'll be other people that may fit into your budget, and that's it. And then he took it on himself to then leave lots of reviews in, things like Google, on Yelp, etc. And it's interesting where the way I see that now is it's a reflection on him as opposed to on me. It's the place he was in at the time of creating that. And before, I think that an old version of me may have struggled with that. And I think the current version of me just says, it's almost like sending love to someone and saying, I know you're not in a great place right now, but I'm not here to help that. I'm just here to say, no, I'm not going to play ball with you in that respect. So it's tough. It is a tough one. I know. And I know a lot of people can go through that, but I guess so many things have happened in my life that it doesn't shape me anymore, because like yourself, you have to almost become grounded in your authenticity. You know why you're doing something, and that's enough. If someone wants to have an adult conversation about it, we can talk. If someone just wants to judge and throw accusations, then there's no point. I'm not here for that space, right?
Yep. Agree.
Perfect. Now, sorry?
That's a great way to think about it. I agree.
Because I almost see it as if my energy and my vibration is being affected by someone else, either I can come down to their level or I try and lift them up to my level. And if I can't lift them up and I'm not going down, then I just have to let that go, because no one's going to win in that situation. So really, it's best left alone. And I'd rather not use my energy thinking about that. I'd rather use my energy to share my skills and my passion with the people that want me around, not the people that don't, And I suppose being online, I think you probably, I know there's a term keyboard warrior, where people behind the keyboard can be so much more harsher than if you're dealing with them face to face, right? So, just one thing over the last obviously we're still in pandemic. They're still going on. And I know in Australia recently, there was a few cases and everything went, shut down again. How did you deal with the public speaking side when things went sour in terms of the economy last year in terms of COVID?
Yeah. I've been presenting online for some time now.
Okay.
I've got the setup to present online. What I've got at the moment is it's my laptop with a light on and a microphone. So this is the most basic way that I could do a Zoom conversation. However, in addition to this, I've got green screens and a mat rug. I've got cameras, microphones. So we've got all the setup here to have professional online presentations. And what happened was in the first week, everything fell apart. All my jobs were cancelled. Everything crumbled. And so I waited. I patiently strategized and started to produce more online content. And the only option was to do more work online. That was the only. So that's what I did. And work came very organically. Plenty of work came to us. And the reason work came is because I've worked very hard on my positioning, on where I sit in the market with my expertise. I've worked tremendously hard to build my reputation within the lane that I specialize in. And so work came. And our lockdown here was six weeks. The longest stretch was 6 weeks. We've had a few others. In fact, we're going through one as we speak. That's 3 days. So it's been 6 weeks. Then we had one for 4 days or 5 days and another one for 3 or 4 days. So they've been scattered, but they haven't been long. And this one we went through was, let's go online, present online. And we had the equipment to do it already. So it worked fine for us.
Perfect. Well, thankfully, you adapted. And like you said, you built your reputation, you've built your skill set based on a narrow niche. And I think working, rather than going wide, you've gone deep. And I think that's really played into your role.
I have. And I saw people during the pandemic, gym instructors or people that own a gym, all of a sudden are specialists with coffee, or somebody that owns a cafe is all of a sudden a specialist in how to deliver a presentation online, or online presenters are all of a sudden specialists in how to be a barista. Stick to your lane. Do what and people will especially become an expert, or get to a point where others start to recognize you, because you can't call yourself an expert. I don't think you can call yourself an expert. If others call you one, great. You let them call you one. You just do your thing. And I prefer to focus on being a master. On the mastery, and expertise will come because other people will recognize that in you.
Perfect. Now, there's a couple more questions I'd like to ask you, Shil, just get a little bit deeper understanding about you as a person and the way you think, okay? So now we're reaching let's fast forward 100 years into the future, where you're reaching the last moments of your life now. You don't have enough energy to speak, but you have enough energy to write down 3 words. Now, these 3 words have resonated with you all your life, and you hope by sharing them, they can touch the people that are listening. What would those 3 words be for you, and why?
Courage, extraordinary, and superpower. That I use these 3 words in all my talks, which is why I was so quick to respond to them. I use courage because it's my big word, and I like to filter all my conversations and presentations through the lens of courage. I feel when you've got the courage to step out of your comfort zone, you can do extraordinary things. You can do things which you didn't believe were possible. You can push yourself and your mind and your ability to a level that is truly extraordinary. And when you find your courage and you can be extraordinary, you tap into what I think is your superpower. And every single human has a superpower. We don't think we do, and we might not know we have one. However, the way we think, act, talk, speak, the way we perceive things, or somebody might not have a leg, or they might be colorblind or dyslexic. Everybody sees the world in a different way, and how you see the world can be your superpower. So my 3 words are courage, extraordinary, and superpower.
Perfect. Now, this podcast is called Bigger Than the Hustle, and right now you're bigger than the world. So I've got a microphone that's connected up to 7.58 billion people on this planet. They can all hear you. They're all conscious. They're all awake. There's no language barrier, and they're listening to what you've got to say. If I can hand this mic over to you for the next 30 seconds, what would your message be to the world?
For the last 39 years, I have been lying to the human race because I was sent to Earth in 1981 on a spaceship. And I'm actually an alien who has lived amongst the human race as the Indian Superman. And so from this day forth, as I reveal my shirt, there'll be a big S on my chest. How's that for the last thing?
There you go. That's fantastic. Okay, Shil. So at this juncture, Shil, I'd really like to thank you. Thank you for coming on today. Thank you for sharing some insights with us. Thank you for sharing some wisdom. Thank you for sharing your authenticity and your honesty, and going to places which show you as a human being and shows you as the person I think the world already sees, but continues to see, because you are walking and living your truth, and you're walking and living the path that you know you were designed to serve and inspire people with. So I'd like to, just acknowledge you for these things. Just before you go, is there anything else you'd like to say?
I love your background.
Thank you.
I enjoyed the conversation. And look, your question about the last thing I would say, I wanted to end on a note which is quite lighthearted. And the reason I ended on that note is because in all my talks, I do make a reference to Superman and to superpowers. And it's a running thing about all my talks and interviews that I talk about him. So it wasn't designed to offend anybody. I think that's actually what I would tell the world, that I've been living a lie and I'm actually Superman. So the Indian version of Superman. But jokes aside, I appreciate your patience and rebooking this in, and I've enjoyed our conversation. And from here on, I really believe England will be knocked out of the Euros.
Thank you so much on that great positive note for my home nation here. Shil, so thank you so much again. Thank you. Now, this is Bigger Than the Hustle podcast. I'm Bhavik Patel, your host, and just a few thoughts to leave you with before we go. Big energy leads to big thoughts lead to big ideas lead to big actions, and big actions lead to a big life. So keep thinking big. Until next week, goodbye.
The connection, for me, it's actually part of the things that I need to do every day to be at my best.